Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about leadership and conflict resolution. I'm delighted to welcome special guest Jerry Fu. Jerry is a conflict resolution coach for Asian American leaders. You can reach Jerry at his website, adaptingleaders.com, and I'll include a link in the description. Welcome, Jerry. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Hi, Linda. Thanks for having me.
I am so delighted to be talking to you today, and I have lots of questions. But my first has to do with your choice to leave a career as a pharmacist to become this coach. So, what prompted this change?
Yeah. It's a fun journey. I'll do my best to keep it relatively short. I actually still do have a day job as a pharmacist. I'm still in the middle of transitioning this coaching business to be full time. But here's the journey. Basically, what happened was for the longest time I grew up just really failure averse, conflict averse. Leadership was something that seemed very foreign, and I just didn't believe I could get good at it. And then the few times I would try to hold like a position that required leadership skills, it didn't go well. And so I just was felt like if I can't do it well after 3 or 4 times, I would probably never get good at it, right? It's just that pessimist side of you that's just like, I don't like looking incompetent. I don't like this growth process. It's painful. I'm just not going to stick it out and maybe hopefully get better at it. And so I took this mentality into college, even though I was had a fairly successful high school career. I got into college, and realized very quickly I was dealing with a higher level of talent. Initially went in pre-med, quickly realized that I was not going to last unless I had a clear reason for becoming a doctor. And so, still said, well, I want to do something in healthcare. So pharmacy seemed like a reasonable alternative. I convinced the pharmacy school that I would make a good pharmacist, and next thing you know, it's a decent job, right? Quality of life is relatively okay. It's for a while pharmacists were making 6 figures, and so I got comfortable, especially when my mom's mentality was, hey, work for this chain pharmacy and just do what they say. Doesn't matter how uncomfortable or unhappy it makes you, just the benefits and the security and stability that they bring you are worth that price. And from her standpoint, being an immigrant, it's understandable. I can appreciate what she's telling me to do, even if I knew long term it wouldn't work for me. And so after 5 years of working in this chain pharmacy, at one point I realized I just had enough. Like, it didn't matter that they gave me a third week of vacation, because if the other 49 still stink, right, you're just like, no, that's not a good trade. And so I started to look for other options, and I wanted to teach students, but didn't have a PhD or residency for required for an academic, like a conventional university job. So the next best thing was to work for a pharmacy consulting company here in Houston that contracted to teach students. And so a friend who worked there said, hey, I know you're looking to teach. Do you want my old position? It's available. You can apply for it if you're interested. I said, absolutely. And so I'm moving to Houston. This was 11 years ago now. I moved to Houston for this job. It was a part-time job. I'd have to earn my way and show them that I was worth keeping around. And 11 months later, I got fired, Linda.
What happened?
No, it's my fault. Like, I realized I wasn't serious about becoming a credible instructor. And plus I didn't get along with my boss, and that's never a good sign, right? So writing was kind of on the wall. It was my fault. Like I said, it was a tough lesson to learn at the time, but I can look back and say now it really was the wake-up call I needed to realize that, this successful victimhood of where I had some level of success, but was still unhappy with where I was in life, wasn't going to fly with this company. And so that's when the roller coaster got really interesting, where I ended up at an independent pharmacy house of cards job where 4 of my paychecks bounced while I was filling for crooked doctors. And so not only was I, jeopardizing my license, I wasn't even getting paid for it. And then I had a really well-meaning but misguided view of grace where I said, well, let me honor my part of the contract, even if my boss is not honoring his. And all my friends are telling me, well, you still can't pay your bills unless he actually honors his part, right? And so again, conflict averse. I'm like, how do I confront a boss that's clearly ripping me off, right? I don't have no idea. Like, they don't give you this manual in school, right? And so thankfully, after 9 months of that, my friends got me out of that job, got me into another one, which did pay management legitimately, but money was so tight that they couldn't pay me more than 8 hours a week. And so I said, well, what do I do? And they said, you can get more hours for us from us in Austin if you're willing to drive out there, which is about 2.5 hours away from Houston. Um, there are worse places to end up, but it just wasn't home. And so I'm working in Austin, living in Austin, trying to rent a room from some friends I have out there. And I have no idea what my life is going to look like at this point. Right. And so that summer, this is 2012 now, I had a unique opportunity come up from some friends of mine who run a pharmacy leadership nonprofit, through our fraternity. And so they said, hey, we know you've been facilitating leadership, or not leadership, but workshops on the fraternity side, but we have an open opportunity for the leadership meeting that we're doing. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. I love these people. I love working with them, and they're giving me an opportunity I didn't have before. And something happened, Linda, when I started to teach leadership. And, for the longest time, I told myself my ceiling was only this high, right? Like I was never going to be good at this. But now I had to ask myself, after seeing it modeled for me, I said, well, what if I could be good at this? How would I carry myself, right? What kind of work would that involve? And so I came back from that convention, like all, fired up now, because I'm just like, oh, like I think I have a new skill set. And I had the opportunity to either stay part-time in Austin, which was a great team, or take on a full-time manager position that had opened up in Houston. And I told myself, I cannot stay safe. I can't stay comfortable. I need to take on this challenge. I want to come home. I'll miss the friends that I finally got to actually make in Austin, but this is the path I need to choose for myself. And so what I tell people, right, is that leadership saved my career, because had I not taken on that challenge after this company had its funding pulled, I wouldn't have gotten another job interview. The only reason the next company even gave me a chance to talk was that I had leadership experience on my resume now. And so I thought, wow, that's a really good decision. But the problem is that job only lasted 11 months. And so I was like, well, now what do I do? And, it felt like, I had more icebergs to hop to, but they were still icebergs, Linda. And so, they're going to still, they still melt. And so when my previous employer went under due to insurance issues and other drama, and I said, well, I'm tired of chasing scripts. I'm tired of fighting insurance contracts that dictate how much I can work or how much I'm worth based on the work I'm doing. But I love teaching these leadership workshops, and I know what kind of developmental program I wish I had had in place when I was trying to get better at this. So, what would a career in that look like? And so I would ask some coaches who were in this space, how do you do this as a career? And of course, I was too scared to even try opening a business, running a business, scaling a business. I had no idea how to do any of that. But in the middle of my coaching program, we went virtual because of COVID. And in October, I said, how much longer can I afford to put this off? So, filed the LLC, opened the bank account, got the website up, and now I'm in the terrifying path of trying to, build this business. I'm doing some private tutoring on the side to help, keep some cash flow, and doing podcasts, just to, meet some great people and, increase my visibility, but offering hopefully valuable content and an entertaining story in the process. So here we are.
That is quite a story. You have had a roller coaster ride.
Mhm.
I did not expect that. I was thinking more security would be in line with your line of work. And it's so interesting. So many thoughts you had put together where it's so normal for people to want to be safe. And it's so normal for people to not want to have any conflict and to not want to rock the boat. And I love when you talked about how we don't want to do things that we don't feel like we're automatically going to be successful in. It is the try again thing is hard and scary.
Mhm.
You've kind of been thrust into that. It's sort of your destiny where there's something more for you. And
Mhm.
that's really quite beautiful. So
Thanks.
I love that you talked about being happy at work. I
Mhm.
think so many people, they go just where we have the idea that our responsibility is to you just keep you just keep grinding those wheels, and you make
Mhm.
the money and you pay the bills, and it
Mhm.
doesn't happiness doesn't matter. Personal fulfillment doesn't
Mhm.
matter. You just do the thing.
Yeah.
So are you enjoying what you are doing now? Are you happy?
Yes and no. Well,
Uh,
I say no. I mean, it's the what I mean by that is the day job. I still, I jokingly say I have to be careful that it's like a necessary evil in that, it takes up the majority of my time. And but it's the only reason why I can afford to pay my bills right now. And it is the opportunity where I experiment with my own leadership style to really make sure that I'm actually practicing what I'm preaching. Right. So in that regard, I don't it's less about what you love is knowing what is most satisfying to you, right? They talk, like, a lot of leadership books talk about the difference between passion and purpose. Like, passion can wane, but if you have a greater purpose, you're willing to tough out, more difficult moments, knowing that there's a greater reward on the other side, right? But I mean, in terms of what I'm doing to build my business, yeah, is it terrifying? Yeah, but it is. I've had to learn so much about myself in the process. Whether it's my fear of rejection or dealing with my own conflict on this side, um, you know, failed opportunities, like everything. The alternative is worse, right, Linda? Like, yeah, building a business, scaling a business is hard, or at least, it has a share of challenges. But what's the alternative? To go back to a 40-hour week job that I'm really not finding satisfaction in? No, like, our lives are too short for that. So absolutely.
That's fantastic. Well, I think you have kind of an advantage
Mm,
from your journey in
mm,
that you can relate to people and people can relate to you who are struggling with all of those things. It hasn't been handed to you on a silver platter where you just say, all you have to do is be perfect. Like, I am naturally perfect and
mm,
everything will go. It's like people can see, wow, Jerry had a hard time and it was scary for him and he did it anyway. And I've heard that courage is not being afraid, it's being afraid and doing it anyway. And you've
absolutely.
shown a lot of courage in moving forward and in trying new things. So
Mm,
that's fantastic. So you talked about some of your leadership style. So
mm.
what is your leadership style?
Yeah, I patterned my leadership style off the pharmacist that I, co-facilitated with back in 2012, a guy named Michael Negretti. Happy to shout out his name because whether intentionally or not, he provided me a blueprint for me to be effective because I saw the way he brought out the best in me. And when I slowed down and studied, well, how did he do that? Right? What made it so compelling for me to really run through walls for this guy? And so some of the things that I took from him that I've kind of embedded in my own style. Number one, be fun to be around. Number two, be fun to learn from. Like, once I unlocked like the kind of books that I really love reading and improving myself with, oh my gosh, like, I'm sure people are just like, oh, Jerry has got some like interesting, fun insight. I gotta hear more of what he's learning right now, right? Third is, yeah, to have integrity, right? Promises are very important to me, both to honor them and to make sure I communicate proactively, and just to say, hey, I can trust Jerry, right? And also, yeah, just continuing to work on yourself and that path of self-improvement, just to say, hey, look, yeah, be coachable. When someone has tough feedback for you that you don't want to hear, it's to remind myself. And I say this because I used to think, oh God, like, I don't like feeling like incompetent, or, like, but if all it is to recognize, hey, this is for my good and for my benefit, and, then yeah, like, I can receive this well. Like, I learned, like, listen and not to interrupt, right? That's another thing, just to be sure that you take people seriously. Show them respect. Show them that even if you disagree, that I care about you, and I want what's best for you, even if it means having a difficult conversation about some bad habits we need to address. Um, yeah, so those are some of the things that come to mind when it comes to my leadership style, and, just to uh, grab people's attention. Maybe there's an interesting story or example to study or learn from, and yeah, let's not just have a staff meeting every day and discuss what needs to be covered. Yeah, let's add, we have that, but also to, share stories or other things, that so they're not just playing. So my technicians aren't just playing on their phones, like half like paying attention, half dealing with what they're dealing with. It's like, no, that's the challenge, right? Let me find such an interesting example that they're willing to put down their phone to pay attention, right? Instead
Mhm.
of me just cracking the whip. Yeah.
And that's raising the bar. That's something that you
Mhm,
can put down your phone for. Okay,
mhm,
so you talked about some difficult conversations,
yeah.
and I guess let's talk about difficult conversations and conflict resolution. And difficult conversations have not been your strong point. I can't believe that you kept working for a boss who did not pay you. That is
Mhm.
Not good. And you said your friends got you out of that? How do friends get you out of a job?
Well, that's
You or
it's more
something?
about, yeah, no, it's a great question to ask because basically, my network is my network, right? And they just said, like, one of my friends said, "Hey, I'm working for this, pain management pharmacy, and they're looking to hire. Let me help introduce you to get an interview for you, so that way I don't have to keep staying at this, shady job because yeah, it was tough. What's funny is, I had some tension with my parents when they found that I was in this situation because they're like, "Well, hey, Jerry, you shouldn't jump off your horse until you have another one to land on." And I'm just sitting there thinking, Dad, like my license will get in trouble if I continue to stay here any longer, and I can't promise that he's even going to pay me. Any a 2 week or even a month gap in my resume is not going to kill me as if this is the reason for it, right? Because people ask me, well, you know what? How come you have been working for a month? It's just like, well, my paychecks were bouncing, and so I had to leave. And no one said, oh, well, that's too big a gap for us to trust. And true, like you don't want a long, long gap. Like if I'm like waiting 6 months before, no, now that's not me. But like, to have just a gap of like a month or two, understanding that I've been actively looking for work because I couldn't afford to stay there, we understand. But yeah, it was definitely my network is what saved me over and over again, right? Whether providing me opportunities or, training that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's the classic, you can give me a fish or you can teach me to fish, right? Sometimes you need, like, yeah, early on, you give me a fish, right? I need to eat something. But the long term goal, right, is, yeah, help me stand on my own 2 feet and then be the kind of candidate that will automatically generate leads and interest instead of having to rely on my friends for handouts every single time. But the house has to be there because they may have opportunities you wouldn't have available to you otherwise. So yeah, have that available, but don't make it your crutch, right? Yeah.
That is fantastic. I'm so glad that you have a good network that really has your back.
Mhm.
That is amazing. Now, when
Yeah.
we're talking about difficult conversations, and you talked about conversations with your parents,
Mhm.
that's another place where we can have difficult conversations. It's not just at work, it's at home. So, can you give us some conflict resolution, some tips? I mean, how do we do a good job?
Yeah, great question. So the framework that I've kind of made my own recipe, I guess, based on books I've read and my own personal experiences. So some of the literature that helped me out, if you're not good at something, just look up a book on it, right? And so there's a great book, I just typed in difficult conversations on Amazon and, a book came up and that was pretty good. Another book, if you guys want to look at my source material, there's a great book called Four Conversations by Jeff and Laurie Ford. And one of those four conversations is called a closure conversation, where they talk about in an organization, how do you um, deal with broken expectations, or if something didn't go as planned, how do you address that? But yeah, as you said, right, um, these are more business and work situations as opposed to personal ones, like with parents. But so the 5 steps that I've told people, that can apply to any situation really. The first is to picture what success looks like. What does a successful conversation look like with my mom or my dad, or a relative, right, that has an influence in my life, right? We joke about. I remember one of my Asian friends from college talked about how he had an aunt who would always ask him, "When are you taking your MCAT?" And you're just sitting there thinking, "Oh God, like I can't believe this is a priority for her." But yeah, picture what success looks like. Does it sound something like, "Mom, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you that you care so much to uh, care about making sure that I don't suffer, or that I have some degree of stability in my life. And I'm going to, this is the path I'm going to pursue because I know, like, I will find a way to pay the bills as I'm pursuing, what I think is meaningful work, right? Imagine how that conversation would go, because it may not involve them agreeing with your path. You just need to come to a point of closure, right? Like some of the funnier, not funnier, but higher stakes situations I had to deal with when it comes to picturing a successful conversation. At one point, um, I was serving on my second day serving as a church class director. I found that one of the newer guys was sexually harassing women in the class, and so I had to quickly, what's a successful conversation, right? I'm just terrified, Linda. Like, I'm just like, they didn't give me a manual for this, right? They didn't tell me I was going to have to deal with this
Yeah,
situation. But yeah, you're the goalie. You gotta take care of this. You gotta make the save. And it's like, okay, let me, in this case, right? It was like, let me frame this as 3 options for him, because number one was like, okay, buddy. Number one, if this is a misunderstanding, like they're just like you're not doing anything wrong, but they're interpreting your signals wrong. Okay, you need to go clear that up and make sure you don't do whatever's offending them anymore, even if like you didn't mean any harm by it. Number two, you actually are harassing them, which means you need to apologize and need to stop that immediately. Or three, you insist that you're not doing anything wrong, which means that it's your word against hers, and I have to ask you to leave because I've known her longer than I know you. So which option is it, right? So this is what I mean by success. It's not meaning, oh, I need to get him to apologize right now and just assume that it's going to go well. Maybe it's just to say, hey, you know what? I just need him to take action, right? I need my parents to understand, okay, hey, look, they can only control so much of my life, and I need to get them to agree that my decisions are my decisions, right? So that's the first step. The second is to get 10 seconds of courage. And what I mean by that, right? People think, oh, I have to be Superman or Wonder Woman to actually, follow through with this and pick up the phone. It's like, no, you just need enough to set you in motion so that you can't backtrack and once you slam the gate shut, so that when you move this forward, if you backtrack, you basically just waste your time and theirs, right? So say, hey, can I get 10 seconds of courage to pick up that phone, send that email, send that text, because you just need to set that in motion, right? The third step would be to script your key phrases, like write them out. Like, what do you want to be sure you address in this conversation, whether it's on note cards or otherwise? The fourth step is to rehearse these phrases, right? Because it's one thing to write them down, it's another to actually say them out loud. And then, role play with some friends, right? Just to say, okay, what are some things that I can anticipate? What is some pushback that they might say? How do I respond to that? And then 5, you have to do it. Like, you can prepare all of this, but if you don't actually follow through, you have to ask yourself, what is the cost of not having this conversation? How much longer can I afford to tolerate feeling resentful and discontent? So those are the 5 steps I usually tell people when it comes to dealing with a difficult conversation.
So now I'm almost wanting to try it out. So in one of your situations, and one of those people that maybe a boss or somebody that you would have liked to say something to, okay, I'm your boss and I'm dishonest and I'm not paying you. Let's have a conversation. What are you going to tell me?
Yeah. So if I could do it all over again, right? Assuming that he didn't already address it, which we got to kind of finesse this thing out, right? You can just tell him and just like, hey, look, James, can you tell me what's going on here? I just need an explanation. At least I just want to hear your side of the story, right? Like, part of the tips is to get curious about it. Don't assume that you know the right thing to happen. I mean, the evidence in this case, right, is very clear that something, either he's incompetent or evil or both, right? It's just kind of like, okay, but let's assume a blank slate and just say, hey, you know what? I have no idea what happened. I know something, there's broken expectations here, but let me go in and actually inspect it. And you lean into the difficulty, right? And so it's like, okay, let me get curious. If I don't have curious, let me use curiosity. So, hey, James, I noticed that my check got returned recently. Can you help me figure out what's going on? Right. And then here is sad story. Well, and he's going to give you all kinds of excuses, right? In this case, and I'm not trying to make light of this, but it is like there's always some explanation. Like, for people who like to make excuses, they will always come up with a story that's believable. And, it's like, well, this didn't come through and that didn't come through. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, I still can't pay rent this month. So like, how can you help? If we both agree, right? Do we agree, right? How do we move from confrontation to collaboration, right? Now we both agree, hey, you need to pay your employee, right? You need to take care of your employees. Do you agree with this? Yes. Okay. So like, how do you want to make sure that, we can take care of this problem? And how do you suggest that what measures do you want to take now to prevent this from happening again? So we don't have to have this conversation, right? And you show them, hey, we're on the same side, right? We're working for the same company. I'm trying to do a good job for you. I'm trying to bring in money so that you can pay me properly, right? Affirm, it's like what Carnegie says, right? Ask questions they can have no choice but to say yes to, right? It's like, yeah, do you consider yourself a trustworthy, reliable boss? Well, yeah. It's like, okay, well, don't trustworthy bosses pay their employees on time? It's like, well, yeah. It's like, okay, so if that is true, how do you propose that you take care of this, right? And you leave the solution up to them, because the solutions they generate on their own are usually the ones they actually implement instead of the ones that I directly demand that they implement. So that's another thing to think about.
Wow, this is good stuff, Jerry. Okay, so if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice and some life hacks to this emerging college student, what would you say?
Yeah, I guess the first thing to tell myself is that, hey, believe that you can get good at something. Like, believe that you can get something, because that ultimately is up to you to decide whether or not you can get good at something, right? Um, you know, a quick side note, I learned salsa dancing early on in college, and I thought I'd never get good at it. And then after enough time and persistence and work, all of a sudden now I'm teaching lessons, for people to help enjoy salsa dancing as much as I do. So, you know, um, be secure in what you love, and because if you are, then it's okay for people to disagree with you. I think, like, an example I used recently, I remember when my friends and I would argue over whether or not Sega or Nintendo was better. And people would say, face it, Jerry, Nintendo's better. And I'd be like, but I could tell myself now, I'd be like, hey, you know what? You might be right, but I like my Sega. And that's enough. Right. I wish I could have told myself that, like early on, just be like, hey, like it's what Brene Brown says, where it's just kind of like, hey, look, you know, if you are secure, you don't have to undercut people. You don't have to make yourself look better than others by making them look bad. You can elevate them and then elevate yourself in the process, right? Yeah, I think that's what I would tell myself, to say, hey, it's like, and just to tell yourself, hey, some of these conversations might not go the way you want it to. There are plenty of like conflict resolution challenges that fly off the rails, right? That don't go as expected. But um, you are always better off knowing that you were honest with yourself and honest with them. At least if this friendship goes south or anything else like that, at least you have the peace of mind knowing that they know exactly how they lost your trust, right? And why you can't be friends anymore, instead of just like being upset with them and then just like distancing them and then just like keeping them out because you just can't bring yourself to like talk to them. And part of it comes from just my cultural upbringing. And my mom, this isn't to blame her, but she was very conflict averse, where she just didn't want to antagonize anyone. Like, a simple example, right? Let's say someone comes over to my house and they don't take off their shoes, right? An Asian standard, right? Hey, take off your shoes. And it's like, oh, well, do I tell them? Oh, I don't want them to be upset. And you're already sabotaging yourself, instead of just saying, hey, man, would you mind taking off your shoes? This is just how we keep the floors clean, right? Give them a good reason as to why they should take off their shoes. Take off their shoes, right? And that's all it takes. What are the chances that they'll say, no, I don't want to. My feet are ugly and I don't want you to see them. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way, right? So at the very least, ask. Because the worst they can say is no, and that's not a bad thing. No, that's another thing I would tell myself. No means freeing yourself up to look for another yes. And I'm still working on that myself. Like I've been great about doing that for podcast guesting. I'm still working on that for clients. But just to let people know, hey, I'm a work in progress too. I might be a little further along, but hey, I still have these struggles. But what's the turning point? When I know, as you said, courage is not the absence of fear; it is acting in spite of it. So yeah, give courage. Hey, if I can do it, you can do it for sure.
That is fantastic. And I love that those little things, like even the question about taking off your shoes, that's 10 seconds of courage, where you just go ahead and stand up for yourself. That's beautiful. I love how empowering the idea is of being able to gain that personal confidence. We're not looking to win the fights. We're looking to kind of work our way, avoid if possible, but not everything has to be a fight. Um, it's not necessarily a fight to say, this is what I want, this is how I feel, this matters to me. And that is quite beautiful. So you've done a great job and you're doing a good journey. And you talked a little bit about culture. And I think you mentioned that you were kind of specifically working or targeting with an Asian population, trying to help. Is that because that is a cultural thing, to have that adversity really, where you don't want any conflict?
Yeah,
Or
I mean, yeah, no, that's exactly it. Part of it is just strategically niching, because initially when I said, hey, I have this leadership credential, I paid a lot of money to get this credential, but then you realize there's leadership coaches are a dime a dozen. So many people on LinkedIn, right? They say, oh, I am a change management specialist, all these other things, right? And they're like, well, who do you help? And they're like, oh, anybody who needs my help. Everybody needs my help, and it's like boring, right? If you're trying to help everyone, you will help no one. And so I had to quickly niche down and say, well, number one, I have a heart for people 10 years that were like 10 years ago where I was, right? They're just like, my parents told me this one thing, but it's not working out. And I'm getting messages from, my current culture that I, may or may not agree with, but it sounds fun, but I don't even know what I want, right? So you have conflict within yourself, you have conflict at work, you have conflict with your family or your cultural expectations. How do you navigate that, right? And then based on all my personal and professional challenges, every one of my friends told me, hey, Jerry, it's right in front of you. It's conflict. Like, this is your specialty, whether you like it or not. And much like leadership, conflict is a struggle that became a fascination. Like, you struggle with something enough and you realize, you know what, maybe there's a lot to this here that I didn't appreciate. And now, right, I am, and even as I'm terrified every time I have to correct somebody still, but knowing that, hey, you know what, I've been at this long enough to know I'm certain of a successful outcome. And it's not about twisting anyone's arm. It's just about empowering them to realize, hey, you know what, Jerry would bring this up unless he cared about me. Whether it is, a roommate who defaulted on his lease and that I had to deal with that. And just recognizing, hey, you know what, yeah, even if I have to evict the guy, Jerry is not doing this to insult me or humiliate me. He's just enforcing loving consequences of what happens when, I am not honoring this agreement. And I can fire someone with dignity. I can evict someone with dignity. This is not about, oh, I'm going to get you. It's like, no, people are people, right? And we need to show them the respect, even if they've lost my trust or respect. Like, I still need to show them that they are human and acknowledge that.
Isn't it interesting how holding people accountable for their choices and their actions is actually a form of respect? And I really like how you brought that up. That's very insightful.
Thanks.
And I think it's also very empowering. I don't think we can be our best selves if we are not held accountable for our words and our actions. So
Yeah.
thank you, Jerry, for sharing your journey and for your insight and your wisdom. I really loved, my favorite part was walking through those steps, be able to have a conversation. I thought that was brilliant. So I'm going to have to go listen again and write it down.
Sure. And even better, you can do that. I've been flattered when podcast hosts tell me, oh, I got to go back and listen to this. And if you want a free reference, you can actually go to my website, adaptingleaders.com, and get a free PDF download of the framework I talked about. And so you can do that. So if you want to take notes, you can. You want to transcribe the podcast, great. If you just want a free PDF, just sign up with your email address. I'll send it right over. You can also schedule a free 30-minute phone call consult, if you want to share your story, or if you want some help, walking through a situation that is complimentary. If you want a formal coaching package, we can talk about it from there. But for right now, there's no strings attached. It's just, hey, here's a free PDF. Here's a complimentary, phone call, and just, share for sure.
That is fantastic. And I will make sure to include the links in the description as well. Thank you for sharing all these wonderful things that you are offering.
Absolutely.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by author and speaker Thomas Crum. He said, "The quality of our lives depends not on whether or not we have conflicts, but on how we respond to them." Today, I invite you to improve the quality of your life by choosing helpful, healing responses to the conflict in your life. See you next time on Linda's Corner.